Very pleased to have with us on the program right now the editor-in-chief of Officer.com, Mr. Frank Borelli. Frank, how you doing, sir?
Good evening, Cam. I am well. How are you?
I'm good. Glad you could be with us this evening.
It's my pleasure, especially since I don't live in Chicago.
Yeah, and fewer and fewer people do, actually. I just saw a story a couple days ago that Chicago's population has not been this low since the 1920s.
Well, I just can't imagine. Wouldn't you want to live there?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Either Chicago or San Francisco. I'm still trying to make up my mind,
Yeah, you have at that.
All right, so speaking of a city that is not either Chicago or San Francisco, up in Seattle, there was a really surprising story I saw the other day. Wary Seattle police officers talk of laying low on borderline crime. The local union president up there, Sergeant Rich O'Neill, says one of the problems is an anti-police feeding frenzy that is going on. I guess these officers are concerned about getting in trouble if they, initiate a stop based on something suspicious. If they are forced to act in self-defense, they're afraid that they're going to be accused of,
excessive force,
or
unnecessary
violence.
Sure. I saw the same story, Cam, and it's kind of it's very concerning. But this is a thing that this is a situation that's been building across a number of decades now. When you really stop and you look back at it, it's kind of come to the advent of it's really grown with the use of personal media devices. I mean, now everybody can reach into their pocket, pull out their video camera, which is on their phone, and make a video recording of a police officer doing his job. And if it's edited properly, which means if we watch the right 12 seconds out of a 5-minute video, you can see that the officer appears to have done something unjustified because you're not seeing the whole picture. But situations like that have really made police officers wary of what they're doing and what they can be accused of.
Yeah, the union head says, quote, if there's borderline criminal or suspicious activity, I say let it go. Don't go out on a limb. It's not worth it because if it goes sideways, you're going to be the latest poster child on the news. And I understand the concern, I guess, from officers, Frank, but from somebody who's not a law enforcement officer, from somebody who, expects that if a police officer sees something that they consider suspicious, they're going to investigate, I got to tell you, hearing those words are a little disturbing.
Well, but you don't read into it any more than really needs to be. I'll tell you a story real quick. Way back in the early 90s, I knew a police officer who got called to a convenience store for shoplifting, and he found the store manager sitting on this guy in front of the store, this heinous shoplifter who had stolen a $1.79 Lunchable. And is this a crime? Certainly, it's a shoplifting crime. $1.79. Is an arrest justified? Well, certainly if the police officer wants to arrest the guy for the $1.79 Lunchable. This is theft. It is shoplifting. Certainly an arrest can be made and charges can be placed. Is that the absolute end-all answer, or is this a crime that maybe there's another solution to? In this case, it happened to be a homeless veteran who had been thrown out of his apartment, not because he didn't pay the rent, but because the entire building was condemned. He had no family in the area, and he was hungry, and he picked up that Lunchable. Now, if we arrest him 8 hours later, he's going to be back on the street. If we pay for him to have a meal and find some place for him to sleep, we solve the issue. The genesis of community-oriented policing was problem-solving. Not all crimes necessarily need to be enforced to the nth degree. Officers need to have that ability to I can't even think of the word at this point, but discretion, it has to be exercised. And
Absolutely.
For most misdemeanor crimes, it can be. And I think that's what that union president probably meant was, rather than focusing 100% enforcement, zero tolerance, maybe, agencies really need to look at being a little more lenient in that. I don't know how the right way to say this is. A little more community-oriented, a little less strong-arm enforcement, perhaps, is a good way to look at it.
Yeah, and what you're talking about with that story, I think makes a lot of sense. But you still have to have that engagement. You still have to have that engagement so that you know that this guy is a homeless veteran who just got kicked out of his apartment because the building was condemned.
You still have to respond to it. You still have to investigate it. But now here's that officer, and he's in a trick bag because if he doesn't make the arrest and place the charges, the store owner can complain, and he can, the unprofessional conduct can be brought up, or he can be accused of being lazy or whatever. If he makes the arrest, on the other hand, he can be accused of being, power hungry or just worried about how his personnel file is going to look for statistics. I mean, sometimes it's a no-win situation for the officer. In that case, that particular officer reached into his own pocket, paid the store manager, said, "Hey, sorry for the issues," and got the veteran a place to sleep with the local American Legion, and it all worked out. But
Yeah.
this is an officer who took a chance.
Right. Yeah.
And the officers, virtually all of them on the street today, especially in big cities. I won't say all of them on the street because it's not as common in small towns that they're being attacked so blatantly with these media attempts to vilify everything that they do. But in the big cities, they have to think about everything they do, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And unfortunately, it's a profession that's very unforgiving. You think once and don't make the right decision, you may not be around tomorrow to make that decision again.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I got to say, Frank, speaking of bad decisions, I don't know if you were listening a few minutes ago when we were talking about the attack on the ICE agents in Mexico last week. Jamie Zapata, special agent with ICE, was killed. Victor Avila was wounded in that attack. And I learned just a couple of days ago that Mexico mandates when our law enforcement officers are working south of the border to fight the drug cartels that they cannot be armed. Have you?
Then why are our officers there doing that? I mean, isn't this country supposed to be an ally of ours? Aren't we supposed to have these working agreements? I think that's preposterous myself. But, you look at those 2 agents, one being killed, one being severely wounded, and you look at the number of officers killed just in the first part of this year, and the numbers have skyrocketed. I mean, we had 17 shot in 24 hours a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. There's an article about it on officer.com, and when you look at things like that, it just makes me, number one, I feel bad for my brothers and sisters. Number two, I think it calls attention to just how violent the community is that we have to deal with, that being the criminal community, as we defend the innocent and try to enforce the laws and keep the peace. But I really think that when you look at all of it together, we're really moving back to a time it couldn't be more important than ever that law enforcement work with a community that they can trust and that the community trusts the law enforcement that they work with. But if we don't have communication going both ways, if we're not helping each other and watching each other's back, they call us partners in the war against crime because we have to be. If there's a separation between the community and law enforcement, then it's not going to work.
Yeah. No, you're right. And I wonder, Frank, how you, because I agree with you. I think in a lot of cases, especially in the bigger cities, mainstream media is not going to be on your side. They're not going to be on the side of law enforcement. There is this sort of, if it bleeds, it leads mentality. You're always looking for the scandal. You're not necessarily looking for the story if you are a local media type. So how do you bypass, I would say, not only the media, but how do you also bypass let's say even the traditional command structure and the mayors and the chiefs, and how do you get that relationship between the cops in the community and the community itself?
Well, to some extent you can, and to some extent you can't. You can't bypass your command structure, but in big places where you can go back to foot patrols and the known police officer working the community, especially if it's one he grew up in, does that present its own challenges? Certainly, but the people in the neighborhood then trust the guy that they know and respect, and he's doing a job, and it's not personal. It's his profession, and everybody's treated with courtesy and respect. And everybody knows that if you break the law, which at that point is viewed as disrespectful, then this police officer is going to do his job, but he's going to take the necessary enforcement action, and he's going to defend himself. But nobody thinks that guy's just out there bloodthirsty, hungry to crack somebody's head open. And unfortunately, that's the media presentation when there's no other really publicized perspective. So it falls on the command structure, too, to engage the media actively, daily, to show the good stuff that the agencies are doing. And is it going to lead in the news? No. They're always going to, they're going to make spectacular that which is not. They're going to sensationalize to sell their advertising and their news. But, the agencies have to aggressively fight against it, and it's a battle that has to be fought from the line officers on the beat, whether it's driving or on foot or on horseback or motorcycle, to the command staff that has to engage the other community leaders to all come together and work. I mean, again, it's community and the agencies working in partnership together at every level.
It sounds so simple when you put it like that, Frank.
Oh, well, it's easy to say that we should all just get along, but it's a whole different thing when egos get involved and who's going to have what power and who's going to have what say and who answers to who. And, we humans, we're imperfect beings. It's easy to come up with a perfect plan. It's an entirely different thing to enact that plan without mistake.
Absolutely. Well, Frank, as always, sir, it's a pleasure getting a chance to talk with you, and hope we can do it again soon.
Anytime, Cam. Have a good evening, sir.
You too. Frank Borelli, editor-in-chief of Officer.com, with us here on Cam and Company.